to delve the violence. They shall all drown in lakes of blood. Now they will know why they are afraid of the dark. Now they will learn why they fear the night.
Radio Free Innsmouth, episode 384. Finally getting back to covering some black metal. Hopefully that'll make certain people
stop whining.
I swear eventually I'll do another Visual K episode as well. It's just that, I don't know, I do the show for fun. It's usually just based on whatever I happen to be listening to at the time. And lately, it's been a whole lot of death metal.
There is no bathroom.
But for whatever reason, the other day I woke up in the mood for some Crepusculo Negro, and hence, you got yourself a black metal episode. Now, if you're not familiar with what Crepusculo Negro is, this circle of bands, Black Twilight, they're all from Southern California. They're all kind of interconnected. It was a very definitive movement at one point in time. The best way to describe them in the overall metal cultural space is to say that what Grausum Kite and Vothana are today, these guys were for the late 2000s and the early 2010s.
아니 원스 여러분들이
Yeah. Vothana started 2003. Grausum Kite started 1994. Listen, if you're out here telling me that you were listening to either of those bands before like 2015, I got one word for you.
Liar!
Don't try to hustle a hustler. I'm not fucking buying it. Anyways, Black Twilight. It's one of those big cult black metal phenomenons. Just like old school Norway, Blazebirth Hall, Le Légion Noir. And this particular project was my introduction to their eclectic body of work. Talking about Dolorvotre. Now, technically, I was aware of the Black Twilight stuff before, because a whole lot of people were talking about the band Ashdautas, who actually are really good, or were rather. But the thing is, everybody that was telling me to listen to them, these were the same people that were habitually flogging the dolphin to Wolves in the Throne Room, or trying to explain to me why all the random bits of just silence and droning fart noises on Death Smell Omega's Fas Ite Maledictian Ignem Aeternum album were actually really artistically significant.
You know, morons.
And since I hadn't liked any of the stuff that they were jawing about in the past, I didn't really see any reason to check out Ashdautas.
Big mistake.
Ashdautas are actually a really solid project, but due to this misunderstanding, my introduction to the Black Twilight Circle stuff was seeing a Dolorvotre CD around 2011. I just impulse bought it because it looked cool.
Guess what?
It ended up becoming one of my favorite modern black metal albums, and it's an ideal introduction to all the stuff that's going on with the Black Twilight Circle, because it acts as sort of a stylistic bridge between the mid-90s sort of cult black metal and the more bleeding-edge innovation of what was going on with Black Twilight, but also because it's a collaboration between my two personal favorite artists from that circle, that being Eduardo Ramirez, who's primarily notable for Volon, and Juan Cabello, was mostly known for Aris Menda. Now, both of those projects are fantastic, and they're also very distinct sounding from each other. Volon's probably my favorite of the two, the Eduardo Ramirez project. If you're unfamiliar with what's going on with Volon, I'll probably end up doing a Volon episode at some point as well. But in quick summary, Eduardo's probably the most NSBM conscious of the Black Twilight Circle, as evidenced by this intro. Very Graveland sounding. But he's also very notable for his distinctive style of lead guitar playing on the Stratocaster, which is often seen as an atypical guitar for black metal, but he really makes it work. Volon's notable for having rather long songs with a heavily melodic flair and an atmosphere of mixed, wistful melancholy, nostalgia, and a simmering sense of hostility, very much informed by the lyrics, which have a lot to do with spirituality, a lot of Aztec and Mayan paganism type stuff. Juan's project, Aris Menda, on the other hand, has that same emphasis on long song run times and idiosyncratic lead guitar, but the atmosphere is a lot more tortured and depraved sounding, befitting the lyrics, which are mostly about depression, mental illness, a whole lot of sadomasochism, sexual depravity. Volon and Aris Menda are both fantastic, and I actually got to see both of them live once, which was quite the experience. I even got to briefly talk to Eduardo Ramirez, who was somewhat infamous in the underground in my city for a possible fracas that occurred back when he was the touring bassist for Bone Owl that involved urine and Reed from Speedwolf's couch. It's always more You know, what are you gonna do, huh? He seemed like a cool dude when I talked to him, though. Apparently, Eduardo and Juan may have had some sort of falling out in recent years. Arizmendi has since left the Black Twilight Circle. I don't know if that was due to ideological concerns or whatever, but it makes sense that back when that circle was going at full steam, these guys were going to start up a project together, because they had both been in Ashtualtas, which was the genesis point for all of the Black Twilight stuff. Now, Dolorvotre, you can hear elements of Arizmendi and Volan in there, but it doesn't really sound that much like either of those bands. Rather, it almost seems like they're doing some sort of an ultra-traditionalist thing, like a tribute to the kind of black metal acts that influenced both these guys a lot. Specifically, we're talking about Le Légion Noir, that cult 90s black metal scene from France that I covered 2 years ago on episode 265. Mutilation, Vlad Cepej, Dolorvotre, that sort of thing. That LLN connection actually is what made me impulse buy this album, because even before I listened to it, it had Le Légion Noir written all over it. They've got a prominent display of their newly invented occult sigil right in the middle of the album cover. They've got the standard ultra high contrast, stark black and white band photos that look like they were Xeroxed a whole bunch of times. And even the name Dolorvotre, it's like midway between French and gibberish, like a lot of the LLN bands used. In this case, dolor means pain in French, and votre, or rather votre, means your, but you don't usually just slap the words together like that. It definitely fits right in with a lot of the weirder names from the LLN. Sus votre, visibitre, belquetre, that sort of thing. And when you actually listen to the album, that LLN influence is immediately borne out. That signature Crepusculo Negro lead guitar is still there. It's actually almost 50-50 between the Arizmendi style and the Volan style, but those backing chords, pure LLN style, as is the absolutely necro production. There's also a flair for theatricality that feels very French. Like every time there's a new riff, they make it feel like a very big deal. Like right here. And like a lot of the Black Legion stuff, this is a very riff-focused album. That's probably been one of the dumbest complaints I've heard from people about Le Légion Noir and the Le Légion Noir adjacent stuff. They'll say that it's metal without any riffs. They must be listening with a different part of their body than their ears, because stuff like this is full of riffs. Are you hearing how catchy and distinct all of these musical phrases are? Like, check out this really long-form melody coming out of the weird bendy part. It's absolutely dripping with raw atmosphere and emotion, and it's got a really cool little flourish at the end. That was pretty sick. As this sort of follow-up come-down style section, very rhythmically adventurous sort of album, as you're hearing right now too, with this very unorthodox drum performance. Then they hit you with another big riff. Really stark, raw black metal, but unlike a lot of modern bands that are shooting for that aesthetic, these guys actually have the songwriting chops to make it work. It really does feel like that whole black, white, gray, and purple color scheme in the album cover like bleeds into the music. It's got an almost indescribable atmosphere to it. And yeah, a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is so heavily influenced by Le Légion Noir type stuff, but there's also hints at other more obscure black metal scenes that crop up. One of the real standout songs for me on this album that's pretty much just full exclusively of standout songs is track 6, Treasure of Sin. This one's still got the LLN, but the way it starts out, that drum beat, that stormy melody, this actually feels very Blazeburth Hall to me. Very Brainacald sounding. And you know I'm all about that. But they give it a peculiarly Crepuscular Negro style makeover with that utterly unique sounding lead guitar. Pretty sure this solo in particular was played by Eduardo Ramirez because it sounds very Volan to my ears. The LLN depression kind of gives away to a very triumphant sort of sound for this song, particularly once we get to this riff after the lead guitar section. It's still kind of got that French sound to it, but it's coupled with this like martial dogmatism. It just feels very prideful. Powerful sounding stuff. But as the song does start to wander through its paces, the punk beat comes back in and you get more of that standard LLN sound that provides a very dynamic contrast with the more Blazeburth Hall or Burzum-esque beginning of the song. It's Speaking of which, you know they gotta bring that fucking shit back, and they do. And it sounds sick. More of that lead is always a good thing. But then something kind of funny happens with it. The lead guitar starts out the same, but then in the second half of its run, it goes a little crazy. They call that part when you want to play raw black metal, but you're a little bit too good at guitar and you accidentally start shredding. Reminds me a lot of Fenri's talking about certain drum fills on A Blaze in the Northern Sky were a little bit too show-offy, a little too Soulside Journey-ish or Goat Lord sounding to fit with the minimalism they were going for. Personally, I love shit like that. And I think it fits very well with like the passionate overall atmosphere they got going on. The man's possessed when he's playing guitar. He's busting out some Paganini shit. Another commonality this has with a lot of the Blazebirth Hall stuff is that the intros, outros, and interludes are just as worth listening to. They're just as musically substantial as the black metal tracks going on around them. Like, check out this part from the midpoint of the album. Real creepy, soft vocals, reverbed out, clean guitar. Makes you feel like you're wandering amongst the catacombs. Exceptionally well done, particularly towards the end of the track, when they start to sneak in some very chilling keyboard tones. Just really icy sounding shit. Almost reminds me of the synth patches used on the soundtrack to Demon's Crest on the Super Nintendo. The outro track to this album is probably the closest they get to the sort of Mayan affectations that are a big part of Volan's sound. That's just some really creepy sounding shit, on the vocals especially. Whoa, what the fuck? I didn't know this album had a special celebrity guest appearance. Wasn't that fucking King Diamond? Yeah, you got me. I'm just screwing with you. Point is, Dolorvotre's self-titled album is this crazy combination of Le Légion Noir style black metal, other kinds of obscure occult black metal, and a really twisted sense of ambience. But what makes it a modern-day black metal classic is not only the combination of all of that, but also the stuff that's a bit harder to describe. The stuff that's unique to the Black Twilight Circle as a movement, and particularly to Dolorvotre as a project. This sort of energy is best exemplified by my personal favorite track on the album, Worship Black Twilight. This is actually the fourth song on the album, but it really wraps up all the concepts I've been talking about in a very climactic sort of way. You've got the dissonant yet melodic riffs with a generally misanthropic cast to said melodies. You have the very long form and thoughtful lead guitar, and you've got that sort of intentional rhythmic unsteadiness that almost seems purposefully designed to keep the listener off balance. Like right here, you almost got this kind of black metal polka rhythm, groove inflected, shuffling, kind of punk oriented, but the way that it ends is very simple and dogmatic. Just bow, bow, dissonant chords, then into much more of a natural groove on the drums, whilst the guitars over top get a lot stranger and more bendy and abstract, almost as if to compensate for the simplified rhythm part. Then you get the real big riff change for the song's midsection, as I mentioned way back at the beginning of the episode. Every time there's a major riff shift in a Dolorvotre song, they make it feel like a really big deal. In this case, they do so by bringing in guitars only. Then when the other instruments come in, you get a lead guitar accent over the top of it, along with these weird outer space processed sounding vocals. Then the more aggressive black metal beat comes in on the drums to tie it back in to the rest of the song's more aggressive feeling. Outstanding black metal work. One of the best black metal albums of the 2000s, and unfortunately, it's all we've got from Dolorvotre.
Just kidding!
There actually is one more Dolorvotre song available to us. Just one. On the 2013 Black Twilight compilation, Tliltik Tlapoyowak, track 7 on the first disc is in fact another Dolorvotre song. And if you liked the Dolorvotre album, you're definitely going to dig this because it definitely picks up right where that album left off. If anything, it's even more aggressive and depraved than full-length album Dolorvotre, which makes sense because both Aries Menda and Volan, in the time between the two Dolorvotre releases, had moved in a much more dissonant and technically complex, savage-sounding direction. This particular section right here, with its ascending, dissonant chord progression, honestly reminds me of like a black metal take on early Voivod. Eventually it releases a chaotic critical mass and collapses back in on itself to jump back into the riff from the beginning of the song and sort of synthesize it with that new more dissonant element. But if you've been paying attention to how Dolorvotre songs usually go over the course of this episode, you know that's not going to be the end of it. And indeed, the rhythm guitars move into more of an ambient cast for the next section, which also includes that signature Black Twilight lead guitar, but in this case, it's much more angular and abrasive in sound than anything heard prior from Dolorvotre. This all leads up to a big Stratocaster bend sound, after which Eduardo switches to the bridge pickup for a more spacey, ethereal sort of tone. I believe the vocals here are switched to being Juan, because it definitely sounds more like an Aries Menda vocal performance, at least to my ears. Whoever's doing what here, it all sounds great, and it's a fitting epitaph for the Dolorvotre legacy, because to my knowledge, there isn't any other recorded Dolorvotre material readily available to the public. It seems like when we got to the mid-2010s, Dolorvotre just kind of petered out as the minds behind Aries Menda and Volan decided to move in separate directions, both of which produced some exceptional music, I might add. But for me, Dolorvotre is always going to be kind of special because it was my introduction to the Black Twilight stuff. And I definitely think what little Dolorvotre material there is stands up today as a monument to modern black metal being done correctly. Hopefully you agree with me on that, but even if I didn't manage to convince you of it, thanks for listening or watching or whatever you did, and I'll see you next time.
Be gone with him!